I need to tell you something before we begin. If you're watching this because you're tired of waking up every night to run to the bathroom, if you've started planning your evenings around how many times you'll have to get out of bed, or if you're simply wondering why your sleep isn't what it used to be, then stay with me for a little while. Not because I have a miracle. I don't. Not because I discovered a secret that doctors have been hiding. They haven't. And certainly not because one food can magically solve every nighttime bathroom problem. Life doesn't work that way. What I am going to share with you is much simpler than that. And because it's simple, most people ignore it. My name is Louise. I am 90 years old. I live alone in a small house at the end of a quiet street. Every morning I make my own breakfast. I tend to the flowers outside my kitchen window. I walk around the neighborhood. I read books without falling asleep halfway through the page. And most nights I sleep all the way through until morning. That wasn't always true. For nearly 12 years, my nights belonged to my bladder. At least that's what I thought. Every evening I would climb into bed, hoping for a good night's sleep. And every evening the same thing happened. Midnight. Bathroom. 2:30. Bathroom. 4:15. Bathroom. Sometimes 5 times in a single night. By morning I felt like I had worked a full shift instead of resting. People talk about getting older as though wrinkles are the hardest part. They aren't. The hardest part is exhaustion. The kind that follows you everywhere. The kind that makes simple decisions feel complicated. The kind that steals your patience, your focus, and eventually your confidence. At first I blamed age. Then I blamed my bladder. Then I blamed my kidneys. After all, that's what everyone seemed to suggest. I visited doctors, specialists, urologists. I tried medications. I tried herbal remedies. I tried drinking less water. I tried drinking more water. I stopped having tea after dinner. I stopped having tea after lunch. I bought supplements that promised support. I bought devices that promised improvement. I spent money I shouldn't have spent, and nothing changed. One physician looked at me kindly and said something I still remember. "Louise, at your age, this is very common." Common. I hated that word because common doesn't mean harmless. Broken sleep may be common. So is exhaustion. So is losing independence. That didn't mean I wanted to accept it. The real turning point came when I was 84 years old. I was sitting with a friend named Margaret. She was 88, sharp as a tack, still drove herself everywhere, still remembered birthdays better than anyone I knew. We were having lunch when she casually mentioned that she hadn't gotten up to use the bathroom during the night in over 3 years. I nearly dropped my fork. "How?" I asked. She laughed. "You sound exactly like I did." Then she told me something that changed the direction of my life. "Louise, your bladder may not be the real problem." That sentence stayed with me because nobody had ever said it before. Every conversation I had ever had focused on the bladder, the bladder, the bladder, the bladder. But Margaret told me to start paying attention to something completely different. My circulation, my evening meals, and one food she ate almost every single day. At first I dismissed it. I thought there was no way something that simple could matter, but curiosity has a way of growing when you're desperate for sleep. So I started reading research papers, articles from medical centers, studies on aging and circulation. I wanted evidence, not opinions, evidence. And what I found surprised me. Many people assume nighttime urination begins in the bladder, but often the process begins much earlier, in the legs. Throughout the day, gravity pulls fluid downward. As we age, circulation changes. Fluid can accumulate around the ankles and lower legs. You may notice sock marks, mild swelling, heavier legs in the evening. Then something happens when you lie down. That fluid begins returning to circulation. Your kidneys filter it. Urine production increases. And suddenly you're awake at 2 in the morning, wondering why your bladder won't leave you alone. The bladder wasn't always creating the problem. Sometimes it was simply responding to what happened hours earlier. That realization fascinated me. For the first time, the situation actually made sense. And that was when Margaret told me about the food she never skipped. Watermelon. I laughed. Of all the things I expected her to say, watermelon wasn't one of them. But she explained her reasoning. Watermelon helped her stay hydrated during the daytime. It encouraged her to consume more potassium-rich foods. And when eaten earlier in the day, it helped her avoid the cycle of dehydration followed by excessive evening drinking that many older adults experience. I wasn't convinced, but I was willing to try. The next morning, I added a bowl of watermelon to breakfast. The day after that, I did the same. Then again. Soon it became a habit. But that wasn't the only thing I changed, because habits work together. I began taking short walks every afternoon. I reduced salty processed foods. I paid attention to hidden sodium. I elevated my legs while reading in the evening. I stopped drinking large amounts of fluid right before bed. Nothing extreme, nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. Just small adjustments practiced consistently, and something remarkable happened. Not overnight, not in a week, but gradually. The number of nightly trips began falling. 5 became 4, 4 became 3, 3 became 2, and eventually some nights became 1. Then something happened I hadn't experienced in years. I slept through the entire night. When I opened my eyes the next morning, sunlight was coming through the curtains. For a moment I was confused. Then I realized what had happened. I hadn't gotten up once. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, not because of the bathroom, because of what sleep gave back to me. Energy, patience, focus, hope, things I thought aging had stolen forever. And that was only the beginning. The strange thing about sleep is that you don't fully appreciate it until it disappears. When you're young, you assume a full night's rest is normal, automatic, guaranteed. You close your eyes at night and open them in the morning. Simple. But after years of interrupted sleep, I learned something important. Sleep isn't just rest. Sleep is repair. It is maintenance. It is recovery. And when that recovery keeps getting interrupted night after night, year after year, the effects spread into every corner of life. Before my sleep improved, I thought I was simply getting older. That was the explanation I heard most often. You're 90. You're getting older. This is what happens. But after my nights started changing, I realized many of the problems I blamed on age were actually connected to exhaustion. My memory improved. My mood improved. I had more patience, more energy, more interest in the world around me. Even my morning walks felt easier. Nothing about my birth certificate changed. I was still getting older, but I was no longer dragging myself through each day half asleep. That realization made me pay attention to everything else in my routine. I began asking a different question. What other habits are quietly helping me? And which habits are quietly hurting me? The answers surprised me. For years, I had developed routines without thinking about them. A few crackers before bed, a salty snack while watching television, a large glass of water at 9 o'clock because I suddenly realized I hadn't drunk enough during the day. Tiny decisions, harmless on their own, but repeated every night. Those habits created consequences. Once I started paying attention, patterns became obvious. The nights I ate heavily at dinner were often worse. The nights I consumed too much sodium were often worse. The nights I sat for hours without moving were often worse. And the nights I followed my simple routine were usually better. That routine wasn't complicated. A healthy breakfast, a serving of watermelon earlier in the day, plenty of hydration before evening, movement, fresh air, a lighter dinner, leg elevation while reading, then sleep. Simple, almost boring, which is exactly why most people overlook it. We're taught to search for dramatic solutions, a miracle pill, a revolutionary supplement, a secret trick. But the human body often responds best to consistency rather than excitement. One afternoon during a follow-up appointment, My doctor noticed something. You seem more energetic, he said. I smiled, because for years I had walked into appointments looking tired. Now I looked different. Not younger, not magically transformed, just healthier. He reviewed my records, asked questions, checked medications. Then he asked something unexpected. What changed? I told him. The walking, the food, the evening routine, the attention to circulation, the watermelon, the sleep. He nodded thoughtfully. What happened next surprised me. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. Instead, he said something very simple. Most people underestimate how much daily habits matter. That sentence stayed with me because it confirmed something I had been learning on my own. Health is often built quietly, not in dramatic moments, but in ordinary ones. A walk around the block, a better meal, a little less salt, a little more movement, a little more sleep. These things don't create exciting headlines, but they create powerful results when repeated for months and years. Around this time, my friend Margaret shared another lesson with me, one I didn't fully understand until later. She said, Louise, stop focusing on what you're trying to avoid and start focusing on what you're trying to build. At first, I thought she was talking about nighttime urination, but she meant something much bigger. For years, I had focused on avoiding problems, avoiding fatigue, avoiding sleepless nights, avoiding health issues, avoiding decline. But Margaret focused on building strength, building energy, building resilience, building habits that supported the life she wanted. The difference sounds small, but it changes everything. One approach is driven by fear. The other is driven by purpose. Fear can motivate you for a little while. Purpose can motivate you for decades. That realization transformed my thinking. Instead of asking, how do I stop waking up at night? I began asking, how do I create the healthiest environment possible for my body? The answers led me toward better choices naturally. More vegetables, more fruit, better hydration earlier in the day, less processed food, more walking, better sleep habits, less stress, and every day my bowl of watermelon. Not because I believed watermelon was magic, but because it became a symbol, a reminder, a small promise I made to myself each morning, a promise that I would participate in my own health. People often ask me whether watermelon alone solved the problem. The answer is no, of course not. No single food can carry that responsibility, but habits create momentum, and that simple habit started a chain reaction. One healthy choice led to another, then another, then another. Eventually, those choices became a lifestyle, and that lifestyle changed far more than my nights. It changed my confidence. Before I felt trapped by my symptoms, now I felt involved in my own well-being. That feeling matters, especially as we age, because one of the hardest parts of getting older is the feeling that control is slowly slipping away. Appointments tell you where to go. Medications tell you what to take. Schedules tell you what to do. It can feel like life is happening to you. Creating healthy routines gives some of that control back. Not complete control. No one has that, but enough to make a difference. Enough to restore hope. Enough to remind you that your actions still matter. And hope matters more than most people realize. Hope is not wishful thinking. Hope is fuel. It keeps people moving, trying, participating, learning, growing. Without hope, people stop investing in themselves. With hope, they begin building again. And as the months passed, I noticed something else changing, something even more important than sleep. It wasn't happening in my body, it was happening in my mind. Because after years of seeing myself as someone struggling with a problem, I slowly began seeing myself as someone creating health. Those are very different identities. One feels passive, the other feels active. One waits, the other participates. And that shift in identity changed everything that followed. Then one evening, nearly 6 years after I first began making those changes, Something happened that made me realize the biggest lesson had never been about the bladder, the kidneys, or even sleep itself. It was about something far deeper, something I wish I had understood decades earlier. It was about something far deeper, something I wish I had understood decades earlier. The biggest change wasn't that I stopped waking up to use the bathroom. The biggest change was that I stopped living as though my best years were behind me. That belief is far more dangerous than most people realize. When people reach a certain age, society quietly starts sending them messages. Slow down, step aside, expect less. Don't hope for too much. Accept decline, accept limitations, accept that things will only get worse. I heard those messages for years, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from advertisements, sometimes from people who meant well, and occasionally even from doctors, not because they were cruel, because they were focused on managing symptoms. But I discovered something important. There is a difference between aging and surrendering. Aging is unavoidable. Surrendering is optional. The moment I understood that, I began looking at my life differently. Every morning became an opportunity, not a guarantee, not a promise. An opportunity to move, to learn, to improve, to contribute, to enjoy another day. At 90 years old, I still wake up excited about small things. A new book, a phone call from family, a walk through the neighborhood, fresh flowers blooming outside my window, the taste of watermelon at breakfast. Simple things, but simple things are often the foundation of a meaningful life. One afternoon, my granddaughter visited. She watched me preparing lunch and laughed. "Grandma, you have more energy than people half your age." I laughed too, but later I thought about her comment, because she wasn't really talking about energy. She was talking about engagement. I was engaged with life, interest, curious, present, and that presence created momentum. The more involved I became in my own well-being, the better I felt. The better I felt, the more active I became. The more active I became, the more reasons I had to keep going. It became a positive cycle. For years, I had been trapped in the opposite cycle. Poor sleep created fatigue. Fatigue reduced activity. Less activity reduced energy. Lower energy created frustration. Frustration affected sleep. Round and round it went. Breaking that cycle changed everything. Not instantly, gradually, but permanently. That's the thing most people misunderstand about lasting change. They expect dramatic transformations. Life rarely works that way. Real change usually arrives quietly. One better choice, one healthier habit, one improved routine, repeated consistently, day after day, month after month, year after year. Eventually, those small choices become your life. Looking back now, I realize the food itself was never the entire story. Watermelon helped me. I still eat it nearly every day. I enjoy it. It became part of my routine. But the deeper lesson wasn't about watermelon. The deeper lesson was awareness, paying attention, listening to my body, observing patterns, being willing to make adjustments, and most importantly, refusing to believe that age automatically meant decline. I know many people my age who assume discomfort is normal. They assume exhaustion is normal. They assume waking up 4 or 5 times a night is simply part of getting older. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But you'll never know the difference if you stop asking questions. Curiosity kept me going. Curiosity encouraged me to learn. Curiosity pushed me to experiment with healthy habits instead of accepting frustration. And curiosity gave me back years of better sleep. There is another lesson I learned along the way, one that matters just as much. Your body responds to how you treat it consistently, not occasionally. Anyone can make a healthy choice once. The real challenge is repetition, doing the small things when nobody is watching. Choosing the healthier meal, going for the walk, following the routine, prioritizing sleep, again and again. Consistency is not exciting, but consistency is powerful. At 90 years old, I understand that better than ever. People often ask me what the secret to healthy aging is. They're usually disappointed by my answer, because there isn't one secret. There are dozens of small decisions repeated over time. A little movement, a little discipline, a little patience, a little self-respect, and a willingness to keep showing up for yourself, even when results aren't immediate, especially when results aren't immediate, because the body often rewards patience. I think about my friend Margaret sometimes, the woman who first encouraged me to look beyond my bladder. She passed away several years ago, but I still remember her smile, and I still remember what she told me. Build health instead of chasing symptoms. At the time, I thought she was giving me advice about sleep. Now I realize she was giving me advice about life. Build health, build strength, build purpose, build relationships, build routines, build hope. When you focus on building, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling like life is taking things away from you and start noticing everything that still remains. Even now, my mornings begin almost exactly the same way. I wake up naturally. I stretch. I open the curtains. Sunlight fills the room. I make breakfast. And yes, I still place a bowl of watermelon on the table, not because I believe it performs miracles, not because I think it solved every problem, but because it reminds me of the day I stopped waiting for someone else to fix my life. It reminds me of the day I became an active participant in my own well-being. That reminder is worth more than any supplement I've ever purchased. Today I sleep through most nights, not every night. I'm 90 years old. Perfection isn't the goal, but compared to the woman who spent years shuffling to the bathroom 3, 4, and 5 times every night, the difference feels extraordinary. And the greatest gift wasn't simply better sleep. The greatest gift was getting my days back, having energy to enjoy mornings, having patience for conversations, having focus to read, having enthusiasm to make plans, having confidence to continue living independently. Those gifts matter more than people realize. If you're watching this and struggling with the same problem, I want you to remember something. Don't look for miracles. Look for patterns. Look for habits. Look for opportunities to support your body instead of fighting against it. Give yourself time. Give yourself patience. Give yourself grace. And never underestimate the power of small daily choices, because sometimes the smallest habits create the biggest changes. My name is Louise. I am 90 years old. Last night, I slept peacefully. This morning, I woke up rested. I enjoyed my breakfast. I ate my watermelon. And then I sat down to share this story with you, not because I discovered a miracle, but because I discovered something much more useful. The human body often responds to simple acts of care repeated consistently over time. And sometimes those simple acts can change far more than a single night of sleep. They can change the way you live every day that follows.